Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild. Tired of boring specials about history, science, and technology? Then get on your best headphones, because you might want to lay down for this. A Sovryn Tech special with the world's foremost anarchist technophile, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge, well, you know. And now, here's Brian.
The Golden Stallion here for you, back after a little bit of a hiatus. But you know what? I decided to, in a way, bring all of you with me. Bring all the listeners of Sovryn Tech. The BSverUDtHYe brought you along because what I have here is a real treat. Okay, this is a special, and I've got a real treat for you. Someone, you know, kind of randomly, actually, a listener of this show named Jesse, he recorded the cybersecurity panel that I was on at the AltExpo, along with three other fine gentlemen. And it was really, I had a good time. I mean, it was a talk that kind of went, it started off as pretty practical. Now it was recorded on a little recording device, and I thought it did really well, because I think for the most part it stayed in Jesse's shirt pocket, and it really recorded kind of everything that's going on. So I mean, you're not getting, this isn't you're not going to get iTunes quality audio here. Okay. But I think this is really good stuff. I thought some really good opinions were laid out. And it's just a really interesting listen. And so I was very glad, that he recorded it. He recorded with permission. He said, "Hey, do you guys mind if, this gets recorded?" And we said, "Yeah, please, by all means." And I thought it turned out great. And so it's a conversation, and I'll talk a little bit more after this runs through, and I'll close out the show. But it's went about an hour, and it was a conversation that I thought was pretty good. It started off with, okay, what are your security concerns, and we'll try and address them. And that's how it sort of started. And then it went into some degree of the hypothetical of, what can you really do about, privacy and all this business. And I just, it was great to hear all the different perspectives. I really had a good time. And I talked through quite a bit of it, got some good laughs out of everybody, I think, at certain points. And so, but again, there was three other guys there. There were four of us all together doing it. And again, I just, I thought it turned out really well. So very simple special for you to enjoy. And this is part of what I'm hoping is going to turn out to be a quadruple load of Sovryn Tech, but it might not, because I have another special where I talked to some guys at Invictus Innovations, or what they're wanting to call BitShares. And so I want to get that out to you, because really exciting stuff going on at BitShares. Insanely exciting stuff. And that's something I've been watching, and the show has accepted as a donation for months now. And I talked about it. I was one of the first podcasts to break the news about it, really. So I was very excited to have that opportunity. But this is great stuff. Give it a listen. All kinds of things get talked about, from, encryption platforms all the way to, I think I even brought up the mosquito drone that can't be unproven that it exists. Oh my. So give it a listen. Again, the quality, did my work with Audacity as usual, to bring it up as good as possible. So, just a nice little bonus for you. And actually, I didn't expect to even be able to share any audio with you. So again, total thanks to Jesse for this. So here we go. The cybersecurity panel from AltExpo, Liberty Forum 2014.
You guys are all interested in cybersecurity?
Of course.
Yeah. So, we'll just do this by, where do you want to improve your, the security in your digital lives? We'll just let you kind of lead, and then we can
Well, we gotta ask our question first. Oh. Who here is from the NSA?
What are you gonna do about it?
A special welcome to our friends from the government.
Just kidding, guys. I'm not.
Don't worry, our phones are doing the job for them.
Yeah.
Actually,
Actually,
take the batteries out of your phone.
on that note, are you okay with an audio recording? Shut it off if you say no.
No, go ahead.
All right.
I think that's a good question. It's like, what does everybody here want to gain or learn about?
Maybe I should start. So, I've been meaning to start a website, but I'd like to stay anonymous. And it's directed to my town. The reason why I want to stay anonymous is because it's going to be, for example, you know how we have prekeen.org? I wanted to create something similar, right? And just to spread the ideas and, throw away a lot of bumper stickers, stuff like that. And just to gain locals to sort of realize that, hey, there's a problem in this town, or overall in general, like taxation, that kind of stuff. But I don't want to be, because I'm pretty much a minority in that town, let alone in New Hampshire, right? So I don't want to bring heat upon me because, I have to pay taxes there, and obviously I don't want to be discriminated and all that stuff. So, and I don't have a good track record with the local government anyways. So I'm just trying to lay low. How do I want to have a fake name, a fake email address.
Right, so...
You really,
okay.
I don't want my name on my website. I want to pay anonymously. I don't want to... And I feel like, Bitcoin can help me there.
So, presumably you don't want a Tor hidden service. You want a public website where someone can go to whatever.com and...
Yes.
See, right, something that any non-tech person can look at. So, then the issue is really just keeping yourself anonymous during the process of setting up that website.
And after.
Right, and after. For whenever you have to service the website and so forth. So, I mean, the way to do that would be to use an anonymity network like Tor. So any time that you that you're setting up, say that you're registering the domain or registering hosting or logging into hosting, you want to be doing that over an anonymity network. And obviously you don't want to give any personally identifiable information. So what you could do is you could connect to Tor. Namecheap is an excellent registrar who now accepts Bitcoin. So if you pay in Bitcoin, Namecheap.com. They accept Bitcoin, so you could register your domain name, pay in Bitcoin. You don't have to give your name, or you can give a fake name.
Even if you probably just got a prepaid credit card.
Right. If you don't want to use Bitcoin, then you could. Yeah, you could
buy
use
something from CVS or something.
The problem with the prepaid Visa cards is, as of a couple of years ago, they require Social Security numbers to activate them. So you can have someone else do it for you, or you can. There are ways around it. I've actually had this problem where I wanted to activate a Visa check card that I didn't want associated with my identity, and there are ways that you can get it activated. They can get a rep to activate it over the phone for you. Requires some social engineering, and they're not really supposed to do it, so it's kind of a pain in the ass. But it's possible.
Actually, I don't know if it was Namecheap, but there's maybe another website, and I have it written down in my office. People are actually now accepting any kind of gift card. So if you have a Walmart gift card, you can actually register your domain and pay for your whatnot. And as far as Tor goes, Tor has been compromised many times. And you can't change the fact that the DHAs or whoever paid millions of dollars for its development. So CIA uses it, or whoever uses it.
Tor's an open protocol, and development, although it was originally funded by DARPA and the Navy, it's not run by them anymore. It's run by an independent organization, and the code is all open source, so everyone can audit it and make sure that there's
your other
nothing hidden in there.
Like just using some public Wi-Fi somewhere with a laptop.
Tor is not without its flaws, but I don't think it's correct to say it's been compromised. Rather, what's happened, especially when recently, you might remember Tor Mail being taken down and Liberty Hosting, and all the companies they had. What happened there is that there was an exploit. So first they took down the Liberty Hosting guy, and then there was
Freedom Hosting.
Freedom Hosting, and then there was an exploit, a vulnerability in the version of Firefox that was being distributed with the Tor browser bundle. It had already been patched in Firefox, but they use the long-term support version of Firefox. They don't have to update it as often. It hadn't gotten that patch. That was one problem. So I think that I don't think that the government engineered that vulnerability. Rather, I think that they took advantage of it while they still could. They jumped on it when they saw that they weren't going to have another chance to. And by doing that, they were able to identify a lot of people who visited freedom hosting sites over Tor. But in general, I mean, at its basic level, I wouldn't say that Tor has been compromised. I still consider it secure.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind with Tor, because this is something a lot of people bring up, is how it was funded by DARPA, or the U.S. Navy dollars went to it. Government money went to every web service in the world. I mean, there's not a one that it doesn't go to. So it's far more important, at least for me, is to who's behind, who's running the company that's involved. Okay, like you wouldn't want to trust Google because Larry Page isn't a libertarian at all. You can ask Declan McCullough, the guy's had him in his house, and he'll tell you, this guy's not a libertarian. It's where you take Tor, and one of your main guys there is Jacob Applebaum, who's a straight up anarchist. Which company do who do you want to trust? What you're using, and that's one of the Tor is one of the few things where you have genuine anarchists, involved with production. So to look at it from a monetary aspect, there's nothing you can use that doesn't have some kind of government funding somewhere down the line. So it's just, I mean, it's a great point to bring up, but it's important to keep that in perspective.
And when they developed it for their own use, to keep their own communications anonymous. Right. So they certainly didn't want there to be a vulnerability when they were then users.
Right, that's part of it, convincing that it does work. It just, recently I've seen, and not that I trust any news for that matter, but RT ran a small, section on it and said that, and actually there was a guy on the RT which was from Holland, and who basically had broken into the network, whatever the technical terms are. I'm not an IT guy, but and able to retrieve personal emails. Not necessarily identify who was the people who were emailing or where it came from, but actually able to retrieve some data that was being transferred.
So there is the concern that a large portion, something like 30% of exit nodes, the nodes that actually send your unencrypted request out into the internet, are located in Virginia and probably owned by the feds. And it's possible, if you use the same Tor route repeatedly, if you don't click the get a new identity button in Vidalia, it's theoretically possible that there are statistical attacks that over a while they could start to put together the beginning, who's at the beginning of that route, who's at the end of it. But if you change identities often, then even that theoretical vulnerability won't exist.
So you also have to think about, who are you trying to protect yourself from? I mean, are you trying to protect yourself from the government or from people in your town figuring out who runs this website? Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Even a simple VPN that gets them out of the town.
You have to think about what your threat model is. If you don't have to hide yourself from the NSA's most wanted list, then just having a simple VPN service.
If it's just the local people of your town and it's not like a government organization, you can just pay to keep the data from your DNS provider to keep your information private, and they won't know. So you don't need to go to an
but even if you're worried about them subpoenaing GoDaddy or whoever your registrar is, you can still, if you use a VPN, you'll pay a few bucks a month for it, and it'll keep you anonymous, and they won't.
Now, is the Tor a VPN as well, or is it just a bundle?
Sort of. Well, Tor uses onion routing, so rather than going through your communications being relayed through one VPN, you're actually being relayed through many different nodes until you eventually exit that.
So think about it this way with the VPN. If the VPN service keeps logs, somebody with authority to request the information could get the information about whose traffic belonged to what. But with Tor, hypothetically, because of the way it's designed, that can't be tracked even by anybody who knows the whole network.
Well, if you knew the whole network, if you knew a very large portion of it, you could. But just having access to a few nodes or even a large portion of the exit nodes would not be sufficient.
So if I can add a quick comment too. It's a fallacy to think of privacy in terms of being perfect. Mm-hmm. So in the world of security, usually what I do, I encourage people to think in terms of risk. And what we do is we manage risk. You never get rid of it. It's not possible. So what we do, we try to take a risk management approach to the problem. And what you do, you determine the solution based on the cost. So you could build a perfect computer that may work for $10 million, but it's unfeasible because you can't sell it. You have to think of it in terms of risk management.
Right. So identify your threat model first, and then figure out what you have to do to stay safe from those particular threats. I also want to mention that if you're pretty tech savvy, you might also want to check out I2P, the Invisible Internet Project, which has some of the same use cases as Tor, but whereas Tor was originally developed for anonymous web browsing, and then hidden services like Silk Road were an afterthought, I2P was developed from the ground up for hidden services, and anonymous web browsing is provided as a hidden service by certain services.
So it offers additional protection against leaking data and things like that.
The main benefit, as far as I'm concerned, is certainly it's not as easy to use right now, and it doesn't have anything simple like the Tor browser bundle. You need to be kind of tech savvy to set it up, and that's why I said that. But the advantage is that it's scalable. In Tor, most nodes are not relays, so there are tons and tons of users, and most of them are not relays, and as it grows, that's going to become a big scalability problem. Whereas with I2P, every node is a relay, and that's one advantage. You were saying before people are compromised with Tor, there are a lot of pitfalls that you need to be aware of. For example, Tor only encrypts, it only hides your source location, right? Somebody watching where your request ends up can't see where it started, and vice versa, but it doesn't hide the content of that request. So if the content of your communication contains some personally identifiable information, then
phone number, address, name.
There's that sort of thing. In addition,
location is enabled on your browser, and they ask for that.
There's a problem with BitTorrent, right? Don't use BitTorrent over Tor, even though it'll be really slow. Don't do it anyway because most clients will include your IP address in some of the packets that they send over BitTorrent, and therefore it's plain for everyone to see.
It's for performance reasons in BitTorrent, I think.
That includes your IP address for better discovery?
Yeah.
Something like that. But, what's up, Mateus?
Just kind of to circle back to Scotia's original kind of concern, can you speak a little bit more? I know that there's a group that I sometimes use called RiseUp, and they have secure email hosting as well as VPN hosting, and it's for free. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard of this group?
Yeah, I use RiseUp. Okay. One thing is, don't mention capitalism if you use them. And I mean, that's fine. I'm not a fan of the word myself. But,
sure. Yeah, they're a left anarchist group.
Yeah. But they're really good. There are debates as to, because they have had their servers seized by the FBI a few years ago. They are trying to do Leapfrog, I think, is one of their newer email protocols that they're trying to set up, which is a pretty good system. It's worth using, in my opinion. But like was mentioned, this idea of perfect security doesn't exist. As far as a lot of people think that it's more of a danger, this is important to bring up. Using RiseUp is more of a danger because everybody that that uses it is essentially it's meant for activists. And so what the FBI, whoever seized RiseUp's networks, and servers, would essentially have a laundry list of activists around the world, or at least in the United States. And that's a problem, too, that they're based out of the United States. That's where I think most people recommend use something that's elsewhere. Like if you're using a VPN service, use like ProXPN that's like based in Thailand.
I used to use a private internet access, but for the same reason, after the Snowden revelations, I took that as the last straw because they're based in the U.S. Even though they make some very good privacy guarantees, they don't keep logs and so forth. The fact that they may be susceptible to the same types of national security coercion that LavaBit was made me wary, so I switched to Bola VPN, which is based in Malaysia.
Sure. Yeah, so with RiseUp, with that concern in mind, that you're going to have a laundry list of activists, that's actually more of a case for everybody should be using it. Because then it's not just activists. Exactly. Right. And so if everybody jumps on it, everybody starts using their VPNs. And they only have 2 VPN services right now in Seattle, New York City. Right. but again, the more people donate, the more they can do. So really, it's not a case to not use it. It's the exact opposite. It's a case to many people.
It's kind of like tragedy of the commons.
Exactly.
It's only a case to use it if everyone else does too.
Right. But the more, and it's something where you have to have you have to know two people that have Rise Up to be able to. You have to get invited.
Well, no, but if you can send them a message and a request and
you can do that.
Yeah,
sure, okay.
Yeah.
So I've. As soon as are you done?
Yeah, please.
I've done a little bit of thought experiments around privacy and wanting to be anonymous, and so I want to throw a concept out, and I'm going to also ask my esteemed panel members here whether they support the fact that this is truly a good way to attain anonymity. So if you use something like the Tor browser bundle, and you use Tor, and if you're in a public library, and so you're not coming from your home IP address, and if you also then are paranoid enough to actually use a Linux distribution where you can scramble your machine address code before you connect to their Wi-Fi, then hypothetically, if 3 days from now someone says, okay, this guy was in the library.
Spoofing a MAC address?
Yeah. And so if someone says, 3 days ago this guy here was in the library, even if they went to the library and checked the logs on the router, they're not going to see anything that could be traced back to you, right? So
security cameras.
Well, yeah, I mean, go to a coffee shop. But
sit in the corner.
This is. It seems. I mean, there's no doubt that the world is moving in a direction where privacy and anonymity are going to become harder and harder and harder. But right now, it seems like it's still possible to do it. So, what do you guys have to say about that?
Well, when you connect to public Wi-Fi, it also gets the name on your computer, right? Like with the Ross Ulbricht indictment, I guess that's one of the links that they had is when he connected, it got the name on that he put the Frosty name.
Well, with public Wi-Fi, you have the concern of like when you log into McDonald's, you get a cookie. That essentially, because you can't just log on and then go on the internet. You have to go to a website that they did the same thing in the hotel. And that generally gets some degree of identifying information. Like with a VPN, you can't actually. You have to connect first to the hotel Wi-Fi, and then you can initiate your VPN. Otherwise, it won't connect because VPN's not connecting. There's no network for it to connect to. So I guess my thought on that is maybe. That's really the best I can say.
Transmit a lot of data too, though.
I think in addition, if depending, so again, as I forget that gentleman's name, but who said that you should identify your threat vectors first, figure out your risk model. But for the what's your name? Virgil. Okay. So for the highest level of security that I might potentially ever need, I would probably buy a new computer, or at the very least reboot into a Tails operating system, which, for those who don't know, is a Linux distribution, bootable from a CD.
Debian?
I think it's Debian-based, yeah. Which has a lot of anonymity features built in. It's pre-configured to route all your data through Tor, and not to store things in swap space on your hard drive and so forth.
You can run it off a live USB stick.
Well, that's
Tails will not.
You can do a CD too.
Or CD.
You can do that.
Live, whatever.
Tails won't actually save any state, so the next time you boot it, it'll be in the same state as the first time. So even if you've got a cookie, it's not going to be able to track that.
Right. Same about.
Well, Rich, did you want to say something?
Something about that is the company I work for does network monitoring software, and it's amazing what is just out there in plain text.
Who do you work for?
I'm not going to tell you. Okay. It's amazing what's out there and what the government uses. So I think you have to figure out sometimes you can choose one or the other. Like you can have your path be secret, but not your content, or sometimes you can make your content very secure. And yeah, they know we're talking, but they have no idea what we're talking about. Sometimes there's lots of trade-offs you can make. I mean, there's some protocols where you can only know the beginning and end and nothing in the middle. So I guess you just have to figure out it's a cost-benefit. I mean, like you said, most encryption is based on how long it's going to take to decrypt it. It's nothing, no such thing as perfect. And for our own security, they know we're activists, they know we're friends, so they obviously know we're talking, so that cat's out of the bag. The only thing we can really protect is the content. of what we're talking about. The fact that we actually communicate is probably almost impossible unless you've literally just this anonymous address somewhere and this anonymous address somewhere else. So I think people have to realize that there's a lot of data out there already, and a lot of it's very easy to get, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to figure out where you can get some security. And I think for most people, it's content, not the fact that there is a communication. I think making any communication, the fact that that's a secret's very hard.
Yeah, so it goes back to cryptography, which is our savior, more or less. I mean, that's the last resort we have. Ultimately, I think that's the only answer we can.
Or using low technology, like getting together.
Or out of band, writing pieces of paper and burning them. I mean, that's sure.
Isn't that the point of steganography, that you can actually not give away the fact that you're communicating in an encrypted way, but still be giving the encrypted message that's out there?
Yep.
It's hiding the fact that you're communicating.
Security by obscurity.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. A lot of, I see whether it's Tor, and you're being asked to run an exit node or various like mesh networking technologies, whether it's, Open Garden or something more on the Wi-Fi side or whatever. Like, isn't that a very dangerous position to put yourself in, to be the gateway for the shit other people want to do?
So you're talking about being like a Tor exit node?
Yeah. Or even just a node in a mesh net, just the internet connection in a mesh networking. Like if you put Open Garden on your phone and everyone's accessing the internet through your account with your name on it, then you're not only not hiding what you do, you're like being the dumpster for everyone.
But I mean, you have like plausible deniability that it's.
Is that enough though? I mean, it's untested is the answer.
Right.
Yeah.
There's never been a case of that being used against somebody, but it's certainly theoretically possible. I mean, if somebody is looking at child pornography and it looks like it's going through your connection, they're probably going to knock down your door first and ask questions later.
Yeah, I think there has been a case though where somebody has gotten in trouble for that.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting. There are entire towns now doing this where they're just making it pretty much not a law, but they want all their no passwords on their Wi-Fi. That way, plausible deniability. So, but I do think there have been cases where someone using your internet did get.
You're still responsible.
Well, you're not responsible, and there was one interesting one where. Somebody had an open network connection, and the neighbor was upset at him, and whoever this guy was, he wasn't very technologically savvy. The next thing he knows, he gets a knock from the Secret Service claiming that he had threatened the president. Well, as it turned out, they did actually, it caused them some trouble, but they did actually say, okay, we actually have to prove that it was you. We have to prove the crime. And they did investigate it. They found out it was the neighbor, and the neighbor got in trouble.
Okay.
I would just assume not be investigators.
That's after they come in and steal your computer and ask for But that's a valid thing to say. Like, don't.
His wife was.
Like you're putting yourself.
Oh yeah, I mean it was.
When you have an open Wi-Fi password, when you do this exit node, like that's a risk you are taking.
How about a relay node? Anybody think? Any thoughts on security risks of actually being a Tor relay?
There's a benefit to it, which is that if you have a relay node, then your traffic can go out from within the network without somebody seeing it coming into the network.
Right.
That's nice.
Sure.
Are there security risks that we would open ourselves up to by running as a relay or an exit node? Not the legal side, but the security side of it, cybersecurity.
So, like, if there's a flaw in the protocol itself, and if they can go through the network and you're not separated between the two, if it's on your local network, then there could you would be opening yourself up to that.
I mean, it's becoming popular. There's what they call flash proxy badges for browsers that essentially work like relay nodes, not like a full-on relay node, but it certainly helps build the Tor network. And those are being designed. I think there's a guy at MIT who's doing it. The one for Chrome is called Cupcake. The one for Firefox is the Tor Flash Proxy badge. And as far as I know, because of their license, nothing can happen. But yeah, running a relay node in general could open you up to some problems. Sure.
I think you can actually run a relay node right on the router too.
Yeah.
Flash.
Yeah, you can separate.
Yeah.
But it does publish your IP address, so then it would open you up to more scrutiny.
Sure.
You talked a little bit earlier about running bootable Tails distro whenever you're doing anonymous stuff. Is there a reason not to make like a partition of either a second or third one and run Liberté over that and just use that for your anonymous needs, or is there a reason to have to go into Tails like every time? That can be kind of annoying if you can get a distro for Linux Liberté.
My concern with Tails is that it's a pretty high profile tool.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you can ever guarantee that, like, if you download something, that you're downloading what you think you're downloading.
Well, I guess
MD5
the most secure.
You can get the MD5 checks, but how do you know that what you're seeing is the right MD5? So anytime you're going out to talk to somebody, you're vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack.
Those MD5 should be signed by the key,
right.
and then you check that.
Right.
Yeah. But still, if there's a man in the middle, they can give you the wrong key.
That's true.
So, but just to get back to your question, right? I can't remember who asked the question. You can get a lot of the same kind of protection you get from Tails by making your own, creating a partition and installing Linux in it and putting a Tor browser bundle right there.
An encrypted partition.
If you want to be paranoid, yeah.
It's really easy to break it. It's not encrypted.
Or you can use TrueCrypt and you can have a hidden operating system.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, Liberté is pretty, that's pretty specific for what that's for. That's for communicating, not so much as to where Tails allows you a little more of a full suite to do a bunch of things. So Liberté is actually, I think it's decently more secure than Tails is, but it's a one-trick pony, in my opinion. To want to do more with it is kind of like if you use OpenBSD and then you start putting a bunch of stuff into it.
Right. It's a little more secure because of what it doesn't do.
Exactly.
Right?
You got it. Yeah.
And also, I think for the highest level of security, I'd want something that's not stateful, even though it's somewhat inconvenient. You wouldn't, if somebody does compromise you in some way, you don't want that to carry over to your next session.
I see.
You could do that with Puppy Linux.
So I a little while ago, I TSA-proofed my laptop, as I called it. We were talking about a hidden operating system. So what I did is I created a large partition, a Lux encrypted partition, and used LVM to separate it into the various partitions I need, including swap space and everything right in there, everything except for my /boot, my boot partition, which can't be encrypted because otherwise you can't boot. And then I have another...
There's a trick to that, too.
Yeah, you can...
Your BIOS uses encryption.
Well, it wouldn't be BIOS.
Well, you can do stuff within it.
Okay. But I mean, you have to
boot to a separate... but it is encrypted.
I mean...
There's some tricks.
In ARAMFS, is loads from your /boot, so you need to load it separately anyway.
Right, so you have like a double boot.
Okay. Well, anyway, and then I... have a small... so I installed the bootloader for that onto a USB drive, and then I installed Windows at and a little small partition at the end of my drive. So if anyone boots up my computer without putting in that USB stick and specifically telling it to boot from that USB stick, it's going to just boot straight into Windows. If TSA tries to turn on my laptop and go straight into Windows, they'll never know unless they're somewhat more tech savvy that I have a hidden encrypted Linux partition.
You can also do that at the EFI layer now. Because
really?
Without, yeah.
That's right.
What do you mean now?
Well, before it used to be BIOS, which controlled that, and EFI gives you, you can script your in what used to be called BIOS, which is, it's not even.
So we were talking about communication security. What about, our in-house, our on our devices we're carrying around? What kind of security recommendations do you make? Because, like I said, you might not be talking to anybody, but, you get mugged or arrested, all of a sudden everything's searchable.
So one of the top things you can do is if you have an Android phone is to not use the default thing that they ship with it, because they can update. The FBI can go to your provider, they can go to Verizon or T-Mobile or wherever you bought your phone from and update your phone without you knowing about it. But if you put something like Paranoid Android or Cyanogen mod on it, you're not even, because it's not that default. It takes those keys that they can update that from. You're protected from that.
What do people know about Redfall?
I like it. I use it.
I do too.
It's made by the same folks that do TextSecure, right?
Yeah. Whisper systems.
I was having some trouble with it the first time I tried it, but it's been
the quality of phone calls has gotten a lot better, and the great thing is that it all goes through your data connection also, so it doesn't even use the radio in your phone. It's all encrypted and goes through 3G or 4G.
Any recommendations or alternatives for like full disk encryption with Linux? I mean, you talked about it a little, but
built into Ubuntu now.
Yeah, it's when you install Ubuntu,
it asks you if you want to do it, and you just say yes. And
it's beautiful.
Not for every install option. Like if you're installing it side by side, unless you're letting it take over the entire drive and put whatever partitions it wants, I don't think it gives you that option in the default installer.
How about for Debian?
You can still do it though.
Right.
You can still do it.
You can do it for Debian.
I think it's actually built into the Debian installer.
You just don't click the button.
I think it actually is built into the Debian installer now too. Yeah.
Okay. And what is that using?
It's using Lux, but I think it's using AES 256 probably in CBC mode.
Okay.
I think it's the disks program or application in Debian. I think that's what it's called. It builds in Lux. Like if you want to manage the
I'm not sure. I just use Lux.
If you wanted to act like, say you could use. I haven't used Lux, so I'm not familiar with it. But so say you had a problem and it wouldn't boot, you could then access it offline. It's easy if you had the key.
Ooh, I just heard you do that.
All of this is offline, but yeah, you could.
Well,
you mean you could put it in another computer?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
You could.
It's not like
The difference is just that whereas if you, by default, in the initramfs during boot, it'll ask for the password and decrypt it yourself, you would just have to do that manually on the volume if it's not your boot volume.
Speaking of encryption, is AES 256 still secure? I don't know if that was compromised or if I was reading if that was RSA or something. But
yeah, like anything RSA is suspect.
Okay.
Like they sold out. Like anything that says RSA,
it's only suspect because the foundation has taken money from certain untrustworthy government agencies.
I see. That's why you boycott the RSA.
But I mean, it's
better than nothing. But
Rivas and Shamir are probably, as people, are probably still trustworthy. I mean, they still do great work.
So, are there different encryption standards that we should be using instead of RSA? I mean, no, Bitcoin doesn't, but
I mean,
how does Linux by default encrypt that AES?
I mean, like as far as
depends on the application.
Depends on what you're doing, but I mean, like if you're setting up a key for like a public private key pair for on SSH using OpenSSL or something, then you'll by default I think it uses RSA, but you can switch it to DSA.
Okay. And do you know what encryption is used for PGP? Like on Thunderbird through the Enigma, it uses PGP.
It depends on what you set your.
I mean, it's same. I think it'll use the OpenSSL keyring. So same as I just said. I think by default it'll use RSA, and you can switch it to DSA if you want. Cool.
Do people involved in encryption ever come under scrutiny for being involved in encryption?
Jacob Applebaum has
certainly. There's certainly people who made it onto government lists. I mean, I'm on several mailing lists like Liberation Tech and the Cypherpunks lists, and most people on those lists use proxies and choose to remain anonymous rather than giving email addresses that are personally identifiable, because it's probable that it'll make you a target. But just to be explicit, I don't think that AES 256 specifically is vulnerable to any known attacks.
Cool. So I'm kind of a conspiracy theorist, and so I'm going to give you guys my conspiracy theory du jour. Has anybody ever heard of the Panopticon?
Yeah.
So the Panopticon is this concept that was created by Jeremy Bentham of the perfect prison. Mm-hmm. And what it is there's a tower in the middle of the prison, and all the prisoners are in a circular thing around it. And so they can't see when they're being watched, but they know that they can be watched at any time. Mm-hmm. And so the ultimate black hat thinking is that the whole Snowden thing was not a whistleblower. It was actually a controlled release of information. Because if you make the perfect prison, it doesn't do any good unless everybody knows they're living in a prison. And so, just think about that for a second. I mean, if let's say for some reason, and we don't know how this is done, but AES and all these different kinds of encryptions are essentially broken now. It wouldn't do any good for them to, okay, we've broken the encryption, we can see everything, but now everybody needs to know they're being watched.
Or they didn't break everything and they're just lying to you,
or it's a bluff.
It seem worse than it is.
Because perception creates reality.
Yeah.
And if every company in the country thinks that they've already broken everything, we just better cooperate with them, then they get the same result.
Yeah, why bother? They're going to get it anyway.
So the only reason I'm bringing this up is that I think that it's prudent, if you're interested in these topics, to engage in worst case scenario thinking. If you're an activist, and I'm not much of an activist, I guess I'm interested in these technologies, but my activism is more in a different realm. But if you want to know what's the worst thing that can happen, then assume the worst, which is that none of these types of encryption actually work anymore. And I don't know if that's true, but I do know that if you follow that thought experiment and say, well, how could I communicate with somebody if I needed to, knowing that I'm being listened to, there may be a way to do that.
One-time pads.
One-time pads? I don't know. Yeah. That is a form of encryption. Huh?
They can't break the one-time pad.
They can't break the one-time pad.
Then you have to have a secure means of
pre-exchange.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. or think about using PGP. PGP might be great. It might be uncracked, but if somebody comes into your house and takes your computer and you don't have everything locked down, then forget it. You know what I mean?
Hopefully you're still using full disk encryption.
Yeah. So
you actually turned off your computer.
What was it Naomi will said about them just like when they're cleaning your room in China? Like grabbing you. Oh, did you any of you hear that?
See the talk.
Oh yeah. She was saying that it's like well known, anyone who like goes to a hotel in China, that the cleaning lady's gonna like duplicate your plug in and like dupe your hard drive for the government.
Nice. They're really into clean there, huh?
Well, that brings up a good point. A couple of them. One of them is that like with Russ Albrecht, he could have how they got into whatever he was doing. That could have been done with someone just slapping a little camera.
Sure.
And it has cameras 150-year-old technology. Nothing can no encryption can stop that. They see him type in his password, bingo, whatever, however that all works out. And I'm intrigued by the idea of the full thought experiment going all the way. What's the possible worst thing? I mean, one of the funny ones you can do is on Snopes. You can look up mosquito drones, which are drones literally the size of mosquitoes with cameras on them. And the problem is that Snopes says we can't disprove that exists. And so that's going again full going all the way. These are things to think about. Sure. But
And
that brings it all.
There's also been like with the saying that with the like even GPG, when you unlock your key, they can listen to the capacitors inside your computer and crack your.
Right. That's why there's different parts of the machine running to kind of mask the noise. Isn't there? There was like built in deliberately that other parts of the computer would actually activate during the key generation process.
There were some side channel attacks that were found, but I think those were fixed so that it'll require the same amount of energy, same amount of time for each operation, regardless of whether or not you have the right key.
Don't you have to be on site then to correct that?
Yeah. Well, or just turn on the cell phone and listen to when they encrypt their key.
Or I mean, there's a speaker in the motherboard. You can reverse that and make it a microphone.
Yeah.
So actually, one thing, because people keep talking about outside forces activating, your microphone, your camera on your laptop or tablet or handheld. Like, is there any technology or apps out there that help prevent stuff like that from happening?
A piece of tape over
a piece
the
of
camera.
tape.
Okay, but it doesn't hit the microphone.
I know there's an app for Android. I'm not sure.
Scissors.
Apple or not. I know there's an app for Android. The guy that's speaking here is the CEO of his company, Snoopball. And I tried the app once. I don't use it anymore, but it would get master administrator access for your phone, and it would prevent apps from opening ports when they weren't supposed to. So if like you were just walking around and it's like Gmail wants to utilize your microphone, and be like, no, like why are you? You know, because it would just access your microphone, your web.
So yeah, you're right. The idea behind that is that all the permissions that you give an app when you install it, well, it'll ask you every single time the app wants that permission, whether or not you want to allow it at that time.
Right. So
what was the name of that tool?
It's useful. It's called Snoopwall. Snoopwall, yeah.
That's cool, but I don't think it will bypass what you're talking about because I'm sure.
I've even seen things like infrared ports getting turned on remotely and stuff. Even after you lock them down, think you've locked them down. Right. I've seen demonstrations of it. And it's like, is there something? I mean, some of it may just be inherent that's in the firmware. Then that's just how they're designed now.
The government actually has a program now and it's come out where they redirect. You order a laptop from Dell, it gets redirected to Virginia.
Langley, and
they change the chips to have a backdoor inside the hardware and then ship it back to you.
Oh, I want one of those.
Yeah, I think this is becoming a popular thing, like Black Phone and the Quasar 4 phones, where they're secure phones. They're designed to they're actually like stated as anti-NSA. The thing is that as soon as someone puts Facebook Messenger on one of those phones, it's over. It doesn't matter anymore because Facebook Messenger says, no, I want access to your microphone, I want this. And as far as I know, and I'll look into that Snoopball, it's interesting. As soon as you can't just like block those permissions, you'd have to actually create an app that would tell it, okay, you actually have that permission, but you really don't. But then that's going to keep changing. It seems like a never-ending battle, and really in my opinion, the only thing I've seen so far that you could really say is a secure communication from a phone would be like text secure, singularly. Like that's really about it. You have the problem with phones. Phones are just the most unsecure things on the planet. I mean, they run on ARM, and ARM's firmware is designed to accept every single piece of communication possible. Whatever comes at it, and so and that's by design. Right there, you have a huge security hole just from the firmware alone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good question to answer.
What's known about cloning phones?
I heard a news story that it was in Michigan, maybe a year or two ago. They were at traffic stops. They were taking people's phones and doing something and handing it back to them. Maybe they were cloning them. Yeah.
Well, there is, that TV show, Person of Interest. You ever see it?
I know what you're talking about.
It's like, well, they all the time they walk by stuff, they clone their phone and
remotely, wirelessly.
Yeah. And I know it's possible.
That used to be popular, like with trunking systems, but if you have the right equipment, you can still do that with any like GSM phone. So I mean, it is possible that you have a GSM phone.
I know somebody got arrested as a result of it. But
how could you transmit that much data like that?
Well, no,
it's not the data on the phone, right? It's just the identity. It's like a copy of the SIM card, right? Essentially.
Fine.
Yeah, you listen to the network protocol and then.
Yep.
How many people here have their phones under their own name?
Yeah.
Not me. Walmart.
Wait, you had a question?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't solve the mobile issues, but I'm thinking about is there applicability or validity in going back to old tech and that maybe can't run the latest releases of various operating systems, but loading something like Tiny Linux on it or something that can run on super old tech that maybe doesn't have modifications that allow for backdoors? And I have no idea.
Like, what are you going to do with that hardware? Like, it's slow and.
Well, I mean, if it's specifically for, I'm not even thinking mobile, but I mean, I'm specifically thinking for communications purposes, for getting messages across in a low-tech fashion. I mean, I'm thinking about even one of the things that worked for some of the uprisings in the Middle East was going back to dial-up modems to getting the word out and connecting out that they were reverting to old tech.
There's like BitMessage for that now.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if there's maybe some use in resurrecting old tech that is not susceptible to some of the more...
Like on Hackers when he puts it... Was it Hackers where he puts his stuff on some old PDP 8 or PDP 11 somewhere that he...
I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it's irrelevant and worthless anyways. But
well, it's an interesting idea. There's people who will buy like older Dells that were still like dual core, and they're still pretty popular. You can get refurbished ones. Of course, one could get into the idea. Well, are they just putting in, are they drilling in like they talked about with the Snowden revelations, where they're drilling in bugs, whatever kind that could, key loggers, you name it. I think a more interesting way to look at it is that like our mass communication world that we live in is totally new. It's not even. I dare say it's even a decade old. I mean, not even close. And somehow we got along just fine by not being in constant communication. We got along with just fine. We're driving through Oklahoma. We didn't have, we didn't have signal. You know what I mean? We were okay. And so I think actually if people look more towards the idea of maybe communicating a little bit less, because the Liberty Movement happened without all this. It really did. Okay. And so if people just kind of like said, okay, well, maybe for a couple hours.
Like the mass uprisings didn't happen because they didn't have that tech. Like that's what enabled like Twitter and whatnot and being able to share those pictures with like hundreds of people, that turns into thousands of people. And those thousands of people turn into millions of people. Like you can't do that without that technology.
Well, but I mean, I guess then is that the kind of uprising you want? But,
I mean,
I hear what you're saying.
Like that would have never happened.
Yeah.
Well, you had mass uprisings before that, but again, I agree with you. Is that what
but
you're looking for?
Did anybody know about them? And one of the things for that one is that the world got to see it.
Yeah.
Right.
If it was just a local thing, an oppressive regime could have crushed it, and we would have found out after.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm talking about you had actual revolutions.
Oh, we had
centuries.
30 years ago, we had one without the internet.
Yeah. So then that's the case to have a lot of cameras, around and a lot of microphones running, as compared to the opposite. So that's I guess it depends on your goals.
Do you guys recommend any one or two particular books or other blogs or resources if someone wants to get up to speed on improving their security profile?
I listen to a podcast called Security Now.
Yep, plus one.
It's really fun. I mean, once you get started listening to it, there's 400 episodes. You can go back and cherry pick them, and it's like candy if you have a kid.
Oh yeah,
it's really great, and it makes it. This guy who does the podcast is so intelligent, I feel like I'm smarter after listening to him.
Yeah, Steve Gibson, he's great.
Yeah.
And also Bruce Snyder.
There's another guy that I like a lot. His name is Chris Fisher. He does a show called the Linux Action Show, and he also does a podcast called Unfilter, which is very interesting. What they do is they're quote unfiltering the news, so they look at the mainstream media and sort of try to look at the hypocrisies in it and the backstories behind it, and they look a lot at the technology. They're always keeping an eye on what's going on with drones and things like that. It's a really good one. And I'm going to give a plug for one more, which is not really directly related, but I think it's more related to if you're interested in this kind of stuff, most likely you're interested in what's going on in the society. And there's a great podcast called The Peace Revolution that's done by Richard Grove, who incidentally was a 9/11 whistleblower. He was supposed to be in the World Trade Center when it got hit by the plane. He was supposed to be in a meeting that was happening right where the plane hit. He was late, and everybody else in that meeting died. And he kind of went on a mission, or he had an axe to grind, and he did this podcast for many years called the 9/11 Synchronicity Podcast. And I think he got too much attention from that, and so he backed off, and he's doing something called the Peace Revolution, which is sort of like, let's stop focusing on the specifics of whatever conspiracy happened there, because we all don't want to get killed, and let's look at the things that are messed up in our society that cause that kind of thing to happen. Now, one of the big things is looking at lost languages of learning, the lost tools of learning, looking at nonviolent communication, things that, like, as an activist, as somebody who's digging, who's asking questions, these are tools that are going to help you to connect with people that you might otherwise alienate because this message that you might be bringing is not popular. It's a fantastic fantastic program, and I'm listening to right now a 19-hour podcast about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And it's if you're at all interested in this, just give yourself the gift of listening to it, because it'll open some things up.
What was the guy's name who was running it?
Richard Grove, and his website is called Tragedy and Hope. And it's the Peace Revolution.
He's been a guest on a few other shows too, right?
Yeah.
He's friends with Brett, right?
Yeah, Brett.
Yeah.
Is Brett here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to meet him.
Yeah.
I would. I'd recommend. This is going to sound kind of weird, but I'd recommend. There's a site called privacyistheenemy.com, and it's actually Gary LaChance is the guy who he wrote. It's a 32-page book that you can get for free from that site, and it's interesting to look at the opposite perspective of what about not securing, what about going the exact opposite direction into total transparency. And it's something to make sure you get both sides when you hear conversations like this. So that's something else I recommend.
Well, there is a point for any sort of whistleblower that eventually, if they go totally transparent, then it makes it harder to take them down. I mean, Snowden was a perfect case, and with that very thing.
Sure.
So.
I mean, and I wish everybody could, like one thing I always wanted everybody to do would be like what Assange did, where he had a 4 gig file that he just torrented and sent out. If everybody said, "No, I've got a 4 gig file with a bunch of secret documents," they're going to off everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's.
Have you heard what Snowden's done to ensure his life?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The new BitTorrent sharing program makes that a lot easier.
BitTorrent Sync.
Yeah. So if you know enough people that it will.
The problem with BitTorrent Sync is that it looks like a great tool, but they haven't released the protocol.
The thing,
so you don't know what's going on in there.
Yeah, there's that. The thing I'm waiting for is if they do. Of course, I'd like to see the source, but the thing I'm waiting for is if they do like a backup only key, like so that you could give to your friends so that they could mirror it but not encrypt. Unencrypt it, right? Yeah, not decrypt it, right?
Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I mean that's the obvious like that. Then what you can do is you can go buy cloud space somewhere and give them all your backup keys, or give your friends all your backup keys.
There is one of those like peer-to-peer cloud storage thing where your friends instead of using like Dropbox or something where your data is encrypted on a cloud, but you don't control the hardware. It's encrypted on other people's hard drive that you trust.
Isn't that kind of what Ethereum is looking to move towards?
Yeah. There's another project that maybe one of you guys know about this. It's an open source project called Freelan, and Freelan looks like a way that you can make a really nice encrypted peer-to-peer VPN. And if you had something like that, what you could do is put some kind of heavily encrypted object in it and move it around.
So how long does this go?
I think you just answered that.
It's 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yay! Woo! Yeah! Great job! Yeah! All right. Well, hope you enjoyed that. I again had a lot of fun. I'm getting invited to go to all kinds of things now. Again, the reason I'm doing what I hope to be is a quadruple load. It might just be a triple load, but we'll try and make it a quadruple load. Okay, all over the place. You know what I mean? We got to spill that seed of liberty everywhere we can, right? But speaking of everywhere we can, I will be, the reason for this quadruple load is because I am going to Texas, the Texas Bitcoin Conference, March 5th and 6th. Of course, I'll be there for longer time frames than that. I might get to check out South by Southwest. Of course, it'd be great to have the Golden Stallion of the tech world, the man in triple black, gracing South by Southwest with his presence once again. So we'll see how that works out. And of course, I'll give a full report of the Texas Bitcoin Conference. And I think there is going to be recording being done at the Texas Bitcoin Conference. So whenever my talk from there will be available, I will make that a Sovryn Tech special as well. And of course, then I've got after that, I'll be in New York City for an Inside Bitcoins conference. And then also there's Boy, the Toronto, this is the one I'm really excited about, the Toronto Bitcoin Expo. I can't wait for this. I will also be either a panel or speaking there. I'm not sure, but it's going to be a great time. And whatever I'm involved in, I'm going to try and share with you. So again, I hope you enjoyed this special. And to Jesse, thank you so much for making this available and possible. You really did the hard work on this one. And, you know, I had the pleasure of being able to release it. So thank you so much. And thank you for listening. Carpe Lucem. I'll see you on the next episode. Remember, you're going to be getting quadruple load, well, at least a triple load. So that means regular episode on Saturday and then another episode on Sunday. And then when I get back from Texas, you know, we'll see what we can do then. But have fun. I know I'm going to.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.